Hey guys! Well, okay. I'm gonna be showing the face for this. So, today we're gonna be filming, or watching. My son told me he was a serial killer. I believed him. Creepypasta. This is from Creepsmcpasta, published on January 24th, 2016. Horrorless, that's the and give shout out to Permanent Amadonia, because he was the one who created this. And anyway, let's get right to it. As we mentioned before.
It's strange when I tell them I have an 18-year-old son. I'm 33. When James and I go out, it isn't uncommon for people to ask if he's my little brother. He could easily pass for being in his 20s, and so could I. The past 18 years haven't been without their trials, but I like to think I did the best I could given the situation. During my freshman year of high school, I knocked up my girlfriend. Her parents were going to put the baby up for adoption, but my mom stepped in and helped me get custody. My son is a straight-A student. He's a point guard for the school basketball team. I scrounged enough money to get him a halfway decent car. He's popular in all the ways I wasn't. By the time I was his age, I had a 2-year-old son, a GED, and a job at the local Pella factory. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment duplex, a few blocks down from his high school. He does his homework without much prompting, and spends his downtime with friends or in the living room, kicking my ass at Call of Duty. At one point, I thought he might be gay. I wouldn't have cared, but I thought it was weird that a boy of his age had never had a girlfriend. I asked him about it, and he smiled, saying, "No, Dad, I'm not gay. I just want to wait until I'm a little older to get out there. Wouldn't want you to be a grandfather in your 30s. That was our sex talk. Between the internet and the sex ed classes I had to sign a permission slip for, I figured he knew the basics. A few months ago, he told me he was going out late. When I asked why, he told me he had a date. I didn't have any questions. I slipped him a $100 bill and told him to be home in time for breakfast. He was a good kid. I trusted him. After that, it became a semi-regular thing. He let me know on Friday afternoon that he was going to be out late that night. Each Saturday morning, he'd be home and sitting on the couch playing the Xbox before I climbed out of bed. I never met any of his dates, but I figured he was keeping it to himself. Like I said, I trusted my son. He had a good head on his shoulders, and I had no reason to suspect that anything was amiss. I don't normally watch the news. Between my Facebook feed and Twitter, I usually knew enough about current events not to care. For whatever reason, I found myself sitting in front of the television at 5 in the afternoon and decided to watch the news. I kinda wish I hadn't. The television switched from a commercial to showing the anchor sitting there with a somber face. She looked at the camera and said, "Later tonight, we'll cover a developing story. Several area women are still missing as police look for clues as to whether or not the disappearances might be related." We live in a sleepy little town. The idea that something like that could be happening so close to home shook me a little. The idea that my son could be out and about with something like that happening in town scared me a little too much. I talked to him about it. He told me not to worry. James was a big kid. He stood just under 7 feet tall and had a wide frame. I wasn't worried about someone getting the jump on him, but as a big guy myself, I knew that having a large frame meant very little if someone else had a gun. James assured me that I had nothing to worry about. Just to be safe, I swiped his cell phone while he was asleep. I installed an app that allowed me to see his location at all times. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but I remembered being 17 and thinking that I was invincible. I didn't give it much thought. After setting the app to hidden mode, I put it back on the charger in the kitchen and didn't pay it much mind after that. I figured if I ever got worried while he was out, I could pull up the app on my phone and see his location. As long as it wasn't too out of sorts, I'd relax and get back to watching Netflix. I started following the case of the missing women online. It was developing into a bit of a media sensation in our area. 6 women had gone missing over the course of 10 weeks. They varied in age and appearance. No bodies had been recovered, but the police were operating under the assumption that foul play might be involved. When the 7th woman went missing, my heart skipped a beat.
Okay.
I hadn't seen Rochelle in 10 years. She came back around when James was about 7. She tried to do the mother thing, but didn't have the chops for it. After a few months of broken promises and missed appointments, I got filed a motion for the court to do a drug test. After she failed the test, I had my lawyer file another motion stripping her of any visitation with my son. I didn't want my son to have to deal with that. It was Saturday morning, and I was very apprehensive about going downstairs. James and I didn't talk about his mother very much. She had spiraled out of control after giving birth to him, and used just about any drug she could trade a body for. By the time she had come around to visit him, she had aged 20 years and only 7. Her arms were covered in track marks, and her teeth were yellow to the point of decay. To be honest, I was surprised she stayed alive long enough to be abducted. With a heavy heart, I approached my son in the living room and said, "Son, we need to talk about your mother." James sighed and paused his game. He looked up at me and said, "What'd she do this time?" I sighed and said, "She went missing last night. Police say there were signs of a struggle at her trailer." James stared at the television like he was looking through it, and unpaused his game. He continued looking forward as he said, "Yeah, well, that really isn't news, is it?" James and I didn't talk about his mother because he didn't like talking about her. One of the main reasons I involved a lawyer was because during one of her visits, she picked him up and took him over to her apartment. Apparently, she had a few customers come by while my son was sat on the couch. His first real visit with his mother turned into junkies sitting next to him on the couch as they plowed $20 a pop to nail his mother. 3 hours later, a guy James called Stephen dropped him off at the house. He was there when I got off work. I asked him what happened, and all we would say is that his mother didn't want him there anymore. He had sat outside without a jacket for 4 hours. Of all the things that could have happened to him, I was relieved more.
Okay. So, I'm gonna pause it. I'm gonna do part 1. Because I can only make a 16-minute video. So this is like 14 minutes long. So, I'm gonna leave. Goodbye, people. I have to chat with someone. Bye-bye.